right, class, we're back with the text, and we're reading Macbeth, and this is Act 1, Scene 4. So if you bought the text I ordered for class, we're on page 13 of the actual book. And so as I ended the last lecture, one of the themes that we've been seeing happening in the text so far is this balance between chance and fortune. And Macbeth is kind of hesitating at the end of 1.3, and he says, "If chance will have me king, why chance may crown me without my stir." And so he's like, yeah, maybe I don't need to do anything, right? And so there's this tension between action and whether or not you're going to act, whether or not he needs to do anything to become the king that the Weird Sisters have projected that he will become. So we get into Act 1, Scene 4 here, and we have the king and Malcolm, and Macbeth and Banquo and Ross and Angus sort of come in here. And this is really interesting because when you look at, so this is the king actually finally receiving Macbeth. He's already given him, made him Thane of Cawdor, right? So he says, "O worthiest cousin, the sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me." This is King Duncan talking, right? Thou art far below that swiftest wing of recompense is slow to overtake thee. Would thou hadst less deserved that the proportion of both of thanks and payment might have been mine. Only I have left to stay. More is thy due, than more than all I can pay. And so, I'm totally indebted to you, Macbeth, right? I can't even pay you for everything that you've done. And what's so interesting here is that we already know that Macbeth is thinking about becoming king, right? And his answer here is very telling. He says, "The service and the loyalty I owe in doing it pays itself." And he comments here in the next sentence on what a king deserves, right? "Your Highness's part is to receive our duties, and our duties are to your throne and state, children and servants, which do but what they should by doing everything safe toward your love and honor." You're the king. This is what kings do. Kings receive stuff from other people. Kings aren't in debt to other people. Kings are in their own class. And so he positions that, and we know at the already there's this kind of development that's going on for us as readers, because we know that there's this projection that Macbeth is going to become king, and that creates dramatic irony. Remember that definition from earlier lectures, when the audience knows more than the actors on stage, right? This is and you can think of it. I mean, I'm sure in high school and stuff you had terms like foreshadowing, right? So it's like, yeah, like of course, because we know there's this future coming, but what we see is a dissonance between the language, and we know then more than the actors on stage. Now, at this point, it's just kind of like we've already seen Macbeth cogitating on whether or not he needs to do anything to become king. And so the king says, I'm not going to walk through everything here, but the king says, "Welcome hither. I've begun to plant thee and will labor to make thee full of growing." So look at this kind of persistent metaphorical language that Shakespeare uses. So this is a plant metaphor, and then we get growing. So "Welcome hither. I've begun to plant thee and will labor to make thee full of growing. Noble Banquo, that hast that no less deserved, nor must be known, no less to have done so. Let me enfold thee and hold thee to my heart." And look at what Banquo says back. He says, "There if I grow," right? So he takes that metaphor of growing and plant language and being enfolded in the heart. He says, there, if I grow in your heart, the harvest is your own, right? So we see this metaphorical language of planting and harvesting being persistent across characters. My plenteous joys, wanton in fullness, seek to hide themselves in drops of sorrow. Sons, kinsmen, thanes, and you whose places are the nearest, know we will establish our estate upon our eldest Malcolm. So here he's saying, King Duncan is like, when I go, Malcolm, my son, is going to be king, right? Who we name hereafter the Prince of Cumberland, which honor must be not unaccompanied, invest in him only, but signs of nobleness like stars shall shine on all deservers. And then he turns to Macbeth and he says, from hence to Inverness, and bind us further to you. And so he's Cawdor now, and he's going off. The king's going to stay at his house, and he is sent ahead to meet his wife, Lady Macbeth, and prepare the way for Duncan and the whole entourage that's going to come to Macbeth's castle. So then we get over to to Act 1.5, and this is where we meet Lady Macbeth, who is like one of the greatest Shakespeare characters of all time. She has among the most words. She definitely has one of the most significant parts for a woman in all of Shakespeare's plays. Importantly, if you didn't know this already, during Shakespeare's time, all of the actors on stage would have been men. So men would have been playing the women as well. But nevertheless, for a female part, this is a crucial part. And it's also crucial because, as we will see, Lady Macbeth is like, she's pretty ruthless in what she does here. And so she's not only a woman, but a powerful woman and a relentless woman. And she tells us a lot about gender of the time period as well, or at least gender through Shakespeare's mind, right? I mean, he's an incredible writer, but can he quite get into what women think? So Lady Macbeth, it opens the chapter, or the scene opens with Lady Macbeth reading this letter, and notice that just the letter is. At the end of it, the line, it says, this is Macbeth writing, this I have thought good to deliver thee, my dearest partner of greatness, that thou mightst not lose the dues of rejoicing by being ignorant of that what greatness is promised thee. Lay it to thy heart and farewell. And so what we see here is a very interesting picture, an image of marriage in the early 1600s when this play is written. There's clearly love between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and he's sharing these very internal thoughts with her, and she ends up giving him lots of advice. And so that tells us something about what a wife might perceive her duty to be in the early 1600s, especially like this is like a Christian culture as well. But of course, the play is not set in Christian times too, right? So there's this kind of, you'll see this kind of sometimes Christian language sort of popping into the play, and that goes back to that earlier question I asked at the beginning, like, is this a pagan play or is it a Christian play? And there are different ways to read the play in that tension, and different scholars. So it's not about one way is the right way and one way is the wrong way. It's about seeing the tension in between there. So she sets down the letter, and she says, she's talking to Macbeth, but he's not there yet, right? Glamis thou art, you are Glamis, and Cawdor, and shalt be what thou art promised. So she's like, look, you were Glamis, and now you're Cawdor, and you're gonna become king, and I'm going to help you. And so she sees this as her duty, right? And she says, yet do I fear thy nature. It is too full o' the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. So this is really interesting, right? Like, this is Lady Macbeth thinking on her intimate partner, and the way she thinks about Macbeth is that he's too full of the milk of human kindness. Now, when we compare that to like the captain from the earlier like the earlier scene, right? Who's like, this guy was like bloodthirsty, like defying fortune, all this stuff, and we get this complete different look at the person of Macbeth here. She says, "Thou wouldst be great, art not without ambition." So she's like, I know that you're ambitious, right? But without the illness should attend it. What thou wouldst highly, thou holily, wouldst not play false. Like, she's like, you're kind of too good for your own good. You would always take the high road, and yet would wrongly win. Thou'dst have great glamis, that which cries, thus thou must do if thou have it, and that which rather thou dost fear to do than wishest should be undone. So she feels like he's like going to be hesitating on the action, and there's going to be a lot of emphasis on action here. Hie thee hither, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear, and chastise with the valor of my tongue all that impedes thee from the golden round, which fate and metaphysical aid doth seem to have thee crowned withal. And so she sees it partly as her duty to like egg him on. Like, he's maybe gonna hesitate, but he's got this, and I'm gonna help him get it, and that's what I'm going to do. Chastise with the valor of my tongue. That word valor is going to be important in terms of gendered language that really shows up around Lady Macbeth. So if we go on here, a messenger comes in and says that the kings are coming and Macbeth is on his way. She knows now why they're coming, right? And she says, after the exit of the messenger, she says, "The raven himself is hoarse that croaks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements." So just look at how quickly she read this letter. She's like, I'm gonna help him, and then she's like, under my battlements. Look at how she owns that as a character. Come, you spirits, and tend on mortal thoughts. I want you to notice the word "come" here. Notice like the way that her language here, in some ways, sounds a little bit like the Weird Sisters. It's not as enchanted, but she does this repeating, and she's calling on evil spirits. She's like, come, right? Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe top full of direst cruelty. Unsex me, right? That gendered language, the valor which gets associated with like manliness in the period and being on the battlefield and all of the stuff that they said at the beginning that Macbeth had. She says the valor of my tongue, and here she's like, unsex me. I'm not even going to be a woman anymore. Make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shall shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. Remove all compassion in my heart. Like, I want no obstacles to getting stuff done. Come, she says a second time, to my woman's breasts, and take my milk for gall, you murdering ministers, wherever in your slightless substances you wait on nature's mischief. So she's contrasting herself with nature. Again, that milk of human kindness that Macbeth has drank too much of. She's like, I don't want that anymore. I want it to be replaced. Then she says, come again, right? Come, thick night, and pall thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold. Ruthless. Just completely ruthless. It's great. I mean, it's chilling too, right? And those the calling on evil spirits and the kind of the three times, right? I think that's important in that the language of that passage. Macbeth comes in, and she says, this is what she says to him. She's great Glamis, worthy Cawdor, greater than both by the all hail hereafters. She's just ready for him to become king. Thy letters have transported me beyond the ignorant present, and I feel now the future in the instant. And again, look at this tender language. My dearest love, Duncan comes here tonight, right? And man, she's just like, oh, never shall the sun that morrow see. Your face, my Thane, is as a book where men may read strange matters. Now you want to pay attention to this throughout. I'm not going to go over all of it, but pay attention to gendered language in Lady Macbeth, and when she uses masculinity around to talk about and to chastise Macbeth, as she says she's going to do. To beguile the time, look like the time, bear welcome in your eye, your hand, your tongue, look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. So she's already giving him this advice. She's working on him, right? He that's coming must be provided for, and you shall put the night's great business into my dispatch, which shall to all our nights and days to come give solely sovereign sway and masterdom. And Macbeth says, we'll speak further. So a lot of times these, if you watch stage act versions of the play, a lot of times there's a lot of sexual energy going on between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. There are different ways to play it. And Macbeth is kind of, even here, he's kind of like hold off a little bit, right? So that question I ask you, like when, is there a redemptive moment? Is there a time of turning back for these characters, if and when? That's just something that you might want to be thinking about. Lady Macbeth says, to alter favor ever is to fear. Look, you have the favor, it's been done, accept what's yours, leave all the rest to me, she says. And so then the king arrives, and now we know, as the audience, right, we know that there's going to be some messed up stuff going on, some blatant lying. Lady Macbeth is very gracious on the outside to the king as she meets him. She says, all our service in every point twice done, and then done double. We're poor and single business to contend against those honors deep and broad, wherewith your majesty loads our house. So that kind of lofty language, the way that people talk to royalty, that kind of very the way that a metaphor will carry throughout the phrase, and doubling doubleness and then comparing it back to singleness. For those of old and the late dignities heaped up to them, we rest your hermits. We're just so, humbled that you would even be here, right? We know this is not what she's thinking on the inside. So let's go to 1.7, and we get a long speech, and these long speeches to oneself are called soliloquies in Shakespeare. When a solo actor is kind of speaking or pondering or thinking out loud. And so we get a lot of great ones from Macbeth, and sometimes Lady Macbeth earlier, right, in the play. Here's Macbeth, and there are kind of like servants and stuff in the background, but he says, again, if it were done when when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If I'm gonna do it, if I'm gonna become king, I might as well get it over with. It's nasty business to have to kill Duncan, so let's just cut to the chase. Um, uh, um, uh, if the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his Circe success, um, but this blow might be the be all and the end all here. But here upon this bank and shoal of time we jump the life to come. In these cases we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught return to plague the inventor. And so he's kind of like going back and forth, and like the teacher and the being taught, like he's kind of doing this kind of pandering back and forth a little bit. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed, then as his host. So not only is he my king, I'm also his host. So if I do this is like a really nasty thing for me to do. It's like it breaks all kinds of codes of being a host to your guest. That also, of course, is treasonous to his liege. Who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife itself? Besides, this Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off, and pity, like a naked newborn babe, striding the blast, or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye, the tears shall drown the wind. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. And then Lady Macbeth comes in. So we've got this, like, he's pondering, he's like, should I do it? And he's like, if I do it, I mean, so this is interesting because we get his assessment of Duncan, the king. Like, Duncan has been so mild, he's been just so great to everybody, he's so well loved that, like, once the deed happens, like, it's just gonna surge. And notice how he switches to this poetic language and personifies the emotion of pity, right, as a goddess. And so that goes back to my first lecture in some of the poetic language around allegory, like allegorical language showing up here. And so Lady Macbeth comes in. We know she's not going to have any of this kind of like pondering back and forth. So he's got this moment of hesitation. He tells Lady Macbeth, he says, we will proceed no further in this business. He hath honored me of late, and I have bought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which would be worn now in the newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. And so he's just like, there it is. Like, we're not going to talk about this anymore. He's already tried it earlier. Let's stay this talk a little bit. And Lady Macbeth just comes right back here. And this great moment. Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since, and wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? From this time such I account thy love. It's like, if you, like, you know, you changed your mind, you were like all set to go, like, to do this with the king, and now you're changing your mind, you must not even love me, right? Because like if you said that you love me, you can change your mind that easily. So it's like really harsh, right? she says, art thou afeared to be the same in thy own act and valor? So those terms, act, valor, as thou art in desire. Like, can't you manifest outwardly what your inward desires are? Can't you be the person in the world that you think that you are in your mind? Wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life, and live a coward in thine own esteem, letting I dare not wait upon I would, like the poor cat in the adage. And so they've got that. I think they've got the adage here down. Um, at the bottom. Oh, there it is. Sorry, it's on the next page. The proverb is the cat would eat fish, but she will not wet her feet. Exhorted the idle or timorous to the action. And so you're too. I mean, you're too prissy, is what she's kind of saying, right? And Macbeth says, like, please, like, peace, like, shut up. I dare do all that may become a man, right? I will do everything to become a man. Who dares do more is none. And so there's this limitation about his own manliness, and that if you exceed that limitation, you're no longer a human anymore, right? Or at least you're no longer a man in the gendered sense of the language. And so there is this question about humanity, the limits of humanity going on here. And this is, of course, we know that goes back to Aristotelian notions of tragedy. And Lady Macbeth fires back and she says, what beast was it then that made you break this enterprise to me? Like, and when you durst do it, then you were a man. When you said you were going to do this, you were being a man then. And to be more than what you were, you would be much more the man. If you would have follow up on what you said you were going to do, then you would be more the man than you were. Nor time nor place did then adhere, and yet you would make both. They have made themselves, and that their fitness now does unmake you. I have given suck, and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. Again, that milk and breast language showing up, right? I would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out, had I so sworn as you have done this. So we get a lot of information there. So one is like it appears that Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are childless at the moment right now, but because their kids aren't mentioned, but she says she's given suck, so she's given birth to a baby before, and there would have been like a really high mortality rate, and so maybe it's just it's like sort of accepted. It's not really commented on there. But I think it's important because of the ways that she thinks of her nature, and she uses this language, and she says that, you know, she's been a mother. You can't call her, like, if you're gonna like really demonize Lady Macbeth. I mean she's demonic in I guess some of the greatest ways, because it just makes her really be able to stick out as a character and just say these incredible things. But certainly being a mother doesn't dissuade her from that. But she's comparing gender, right? She's saying, I've given suck and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me, but I would have smashed that baby's smiling face if I had sworn like you, right? And you swore that you were going to kill this king, and like you're betraying. It's like I could betray my nature for the thing that I said I was going to, that I swore to do. And Macbeth says, if we should fail, like, what if we fail? What if it doesn't work? And the question right back, we fail? But screw your courage to the sticking place and we'll not fail. When Duncan is asleep, whereto the rather shall his day's hard journey soundly invite him, his two chamberlains will I with wine and wassail, so convinced that memory, the warder of the brain, shall be a fume, and the receipt of reason a limbeck only. When in swinish sleep their drenched natures lies as in a death. So she's conceived this whole plan, right? She's like, I'm going to get these guys really, really drunk. They're going to get so sloshed they won't even remember what happens. What cannot you and I perform upon the unguarded Duncan? And look at the you and I language. It's very much collusion language. What not put upon his spongy officers who shall bear the guilt of our great quell? Like, we're just going to frame these other people. It'll be great. And Macbeth, these great lines, like the gender here, like, bring forth men, children only, for thy undaunted mettle should compose nothing but males. Will it not be received when we have marked with blood those sleepy two of his own chamber, and used their very daggers, that they have done it? And like, aren't they going to kind of find out? Isn't somebody going to be kind of suspicious? But also that gendered language, like he kind of recognizes this kind of seepage of so-called masculinity that has come into Lady Macbeth, and says, like, you have enough of that you should only bear male children so that they can take some of it from you. Who dares receive it other, she says, and we shall make griefs and clamor roar. Like, we'll put on a good show. And so here Macbeth is, I'm settled, and bend up each corporal agent to the terrible feet, away and mock the time with fairest show. False face must hide, but what the false heart doth know. I'm gonna do it. He's just like, okay, I'm set to the task. She's helped convince him, and so I'm gonna stop this one there, just because we're getting to Act 2 right there, and I'm just gonna break these up and just keep reading the play along with you. If you're getting the play and understanding it, you can skip these lectures if you want. But I'm reading it along with you because I know Shakespeare's language is difficult for you guys. So I'm going to pause this, and we'll get to Act 2 in the next one. Thanks.